Growing up, I was raised in a household where we were all chiefs and there were no Indians. That's still true to this day. Even the grandbabies are chiefs, and we don't have a whole lot of Indians. Meaning that my brother and I, we were raised to be able to speak our piece, give voice to our opinions and thoughts respectfully, and to, share information. In our house, we could express our ideals and, our thesis on what's going on. And we were encouraged to be able to, support those statements and or ideas. So in turn, our children were raised that way. And the grandbabies also were raised to be able to, give voice to their thoughts and opinions and to stand up for what they believed. You can imagine that in my house, there were many, many debates on issues. Even to this day, where there are differing opinions and thoughts about, local or national issues or anything of that nature, where we might differ on how we think or how we process or perceive the information and our perspective on it. And as a result, we have countless debates about, who's right, who's wrong, what are your thoughts, versus mine, who can influence whom. I mean, you have to keep in mind that in my immediate family, we have two, elected officials, my father and myself. And my father was a very successful entrepreneur owning 7 shoe stores across the state. So, he's also very persuasive. And so we have a lot of persuasive arguments in our family as well. The one thing, though, is that we do know how to acquiesce. We do know how to say, if even begrudgingly at times, we're wrong. We can admit defeat, if you will, in a good-natured argument where, the goal is to be able to have these interactions with one another and these discussions and to be able to learn from them. Good-natured discussions, hearty discussions where everyone walks away understanding the vantage point of the others involved cannot be the case, cannot be effective and or successful if everyone always has to be right. At some point, you have to be able to admit that perhaps your thesis wasn't as strong as you originally thought, or perhaps you weren't up to date on your information, or perhaps, there is some validity in someone else's point. And you have to be able to say, well said, or point well taken, or I get, I understand what you're saying, or we can agree to disagree so that you can continue to keep the lines of communication open. Today, we're talking about being a right fighter. My name is Jennifer Mitchell Earley. I help individuals and teams achieve organizational and personal success. And this is Leadership Matters. The first time I heard the term right fighter was when my colleague referred to me as such. And when she did that, it was within the context of being in a situation where, regardless to how much was stacked against us or stacked against me, or the extenuating circumstances around what the potential ramifications of me standing for what was right were, that I still was going to fight for what was right for myself, for my teammate, for my team members at large, that I believed in fighting for what was right. That's the first time I ever heard anyone describe it in those terms. That, you are a right fighter. You're going to fight for what's right. At the time, to be honest with you, I really didn't understand the implications of being a right fighter. From the vantage point of how other people perceive me and what it looked like from their vantage point, and or, what they may take away from watching how I'm responding in the situation. I was simply doing what I was raised to do, the only thing that I know to do, the only thing I was taught to do was to stand up for what I believe to be right. It wasn't until later on in life that I realized, after talking to another colleague who was older than me, who really lamented my ability and her inability to be able to walk away from toxic situations, experiences, and or opportunities that no longer served me. To be able to identify that this isn't really working out for me and to be able to walk away. And I remember her saying that she wished that she could be in my position, but because of life and obligations and things of that nature, she couldn't. And I think at that moment, I've always known that I was blessed. I always knew and still continue to know that I have an awesome support system that most people probably don't have, or people that I've run into who have stayed in, otherwise debilitating and ultimately handicapping situations remained in because they had in their minds, no other alternative, no other options. There was no safety net. There was no support system in place for them to say, enough is enough. So I've always known that. I guess until that moment, I didn't realize how many other people didn't have that. And in my mind, I thought that's definitely something that I want to raise my daughter with, because I was always given the depth and the breadth and the space to be able to do what was spiritually and psychologically best for me, knowing that, material gain and benefits don't outweigh the ramifications of internal stress and or disease and, just just the consequences of being beat down every single day in an experience. So, I'm very grateful for the support system that I have, that has allowed me to stretch and grow, and my ability to be an advocate and to be a right fighter. And to this day, I still fight for what's right, because that is what's most important to me, not just for me, but for anyone that I have been, appointed or been elected or have had the honor of representing in some way, shape, or form, either be as a supervisor, a manager, a director, whatever, to advocate on their behalf as well. Just something I was raised with. My mother was a teacher. My father was an elected official. And I guess you could just say it's in my blood to fight for what's right for myself as well as for others. So when you talk about being a right fighter, there are two connotations of the term, right? The first connotation is that you fight for people. You fight and advocate for what's right. The other connotation, which is negative, is that you fight to be right, that you fight at the expense of others. So it's important not to confuse the two, right? So the first is that one is done out of honor, integrity, and deference for the process, the protocols, and or the people involved. Whereas the second one is rooted in ego, arrogance, and disdain for the process, protocols, and our people. When you are a right fighter and you're fighting to be right at the expense of other people, you don't even consider them. They're not even part of the equation. It's about you winning, and winning at any cost. So a right fighter only cares about being right. They are individuals who struggle to win arguments even if they doubt their own view. A right fighter is someone who gets overly emotional or angry when people don't agree with them, with their beliefs and or their opinions. A right fighter, no matter the argument, will keep going, insisting on having the last word or refusing to back down until the other person concedes that they are right. Often the point of the argument is lost in all the back and forth, and the right fighters need to be right. But their only goal is that their point of view is accepted as the right one. We all know a right fighter. We've all been in situations where what we thought was just a good-natured debate or just a difference of opinion where we could respect one another's perspective goes left, and you find yourself in an argument that continues on and on and on and on, long after you even care what the results are. And in your mind, you're thinking, well, how did this go this way? Like, it's the conversation where it should have been, a minute or two, a hearty chuckle, or I get what you're saying, I hear you, all those things that we say. That doesn't necessarily mean that we agree, but that we hear what you're saying. We hear what you're trying to communicate. We accept that that is your perspective. A right fighter places more value on being right than on anyone or anything else. A right fighter values being right over relationship. And you know that you've had an instance where you've come upon a right fighter. You got a family member that you hate to talk about anything around because you know that this is going to be a long-winded, it's not even a debate, because debates are exchanges of ideas, but it's just going to be one long-winded, often turning personal attack because that person must win. How do you understand a right fighter? Because in order to be able to deal with them effectively, you have to really understand what the right fighting is rooted in. So right fighters value themselves and see their worth in terms of being a winner or being right, and the other person being a loser because they are wrong. On a deeper subconscious level, they believe they must be right for people to esteem, value, and love them. Even worse, a right fighter, their value and self-worth, self-confidence, and self-esteem is predicated on whether or not other people believe they are right. They are dependent upon what others think about them in order to be able to see themselves as worthy. Here's some telltale signs that you're dealing with a right fighter. They have a win-lose mentality, which often alienates people. The right fighter has a mentality that one person wins them and the other person loses. They refuse to listen and consider the other person's perspective. They shut down because the quest to be right is the only thing that matters. A deadly attitude that makes future interactions with them virtually impossible. They thrive on that win-lose mentality, and they don't understand the win-win mentality. And the win-win comes from, when we talk about collaboration, that's a win-win. We both can walk away feeling good about the resolution or feeling good about where we are in the process. Another thing is right fighters look for fault. Right fighters spend their energies looking for any fault that they can exploit. They're not concerned with details or facts. They take what they can, twist it, distort it, and make them seem more right. They're willing to win at any cost. Right fighters reply often incorrectly before you even finish your thought. Have you ever noticed when you're debating with a right fighter, before, if there's a question, if there's a statement, before you can even finish it, they're interjecting with their own thoughts, oftentimes off base to the subject or topic that you're talking about, or blatantly wrong with incorrect, inaccurate facts. I don't even know if you can call facts incorrect or inaccurate, just erroneous information just to win the argument. Before you have a chance to finish, they interject and they make the original point so convoluted, so hard to find, so confusing. They muddy the waters to the point that eventually everyone wonders, what in the heck are they talking about anyway? And what were you even debating about? Everybody loses track of what's going on. Right fighters have little or no verbal or nonverbal self-control or self-discipline. How many times have you been talking to a right fighter, and when they're supposed to be quiet and they're supposed to be listening and attuning to what you say, they are rolling their eyes, smacking their lips, folding their hands over their chest, murmuring under their breath, anything and everything to do to let you know and everyone else who is privy to the conversation know that they disagree vehemently with what you're saying and you're wrong and they're right. Clearly, right fighters lack emotional intelligence. They lack the basic maturity to function in a way that builds credibility and trust. To be able to discern, hey, we don't have to agree on this. It's not that important. And if it is, other information at another time may be able to change your mind. But this conversation in this manner is not going to do it. Someone with emotional intelligence can say, hey, we can just agree to disagree. I see you have some great points, and I'm going to take all those things under consideration. I still feel the way that I feel, but I enjoy talking to you about it or discussing it with you. Or I see that there might be some alternatives. I can see your point. I can see how you would see X, Y, and Z. That's someone with emotional maturity, with a high EQ. Right fighters typically are not those individuals. So you might be thinking, well, then I know that I have been in these conversations, and I know that these conversations have gone left, and we've been debating something for a period of time to the degree that I don't even want to talk about anything else with this person or persons ever again, because I know it's going to go left. So you might be thinking, well, how the heck do I deal with a right fighter? The first thing is, don't get sucked in. Don't get suckered into the conversation. Pay attention to where the conversation is going. If you know that you've talked to this person before, and you know that this person is inherently a right fighter, they must be right at all costs, even at the cost of your relationship with them, even at the cost of their relationship to this project or job or whatever the case may be, then you kind of know before you get involved in this conversation where it's going. Don't give into it. Don't play the game. If it starts up, find a way to excuse yourself, or so that you're not sucked in by it. Next, if you happen to get sucked into the conversation and you didn't know it, it didn't dawn on you where this was going until you were already there, stay calm, stay neutral. Don't take their antics personally. And that's hard because oftentimes they'll take, personal attacks as a way to demean and to belittle you and to take away from the substance of your argument. So it can be challenging, but don't fall for that. Don't, remain calm, remain neutral. Don't engage in their argument. Remember this, that their antics say more about them than they do about you. So people will take note of their personal attacks as an inability to be able to communicate appropriately and or support their argument in a meaningful and effective way. As you remain calm and remain neutral, resist the urge to correct their erroneous sentiments, arguments, thoughts, approach, etc. Don't show them where they're wrong. Just do not engage. Command your respect. If things are going so far south or things are being so convoluted by personal attacks and inappropriate gestures and or words, then call it out. Bring attention to it. Call out inappropriate language. Call out disrespectful attacks and arguments that are not relevant to the discussion. Arguments that are not based in fact. And then lastly, know when to say when. Know when it's time to end the conversation and walk away. Because ultimately, you're not going to win this conversation, this argument, this debate, this match of wits, whatever you want to refer to it as. You're not going to win because the right fighter is going to win at any means necessary. And ultimately, because they refuse to see a perspective other than their own, you never even have a chance to sway them or to impact their thought process around them or to give them a different perspective than their own because they're unwilling to even consider it. So cut your losses. say, hey, again, it was good talking to you. I gotta, you check your watch. I gotta run. Good talking to you. And you walk away. You don't have to even agree with them. You don't even have to give them, the benefit of understanding their perspective, depending on where you are. Sometimes that may prolong things. I'd like to believe that in making sure that my own ego doesn't take away and run with the situation. I do want to be open-minded in the process. I do want to think, well, maybe is there a point somewhere? Is it, not because of who it's coming from or even how it's coming at me? Is there something of value that I can actually take away from this? If the answer is yes, then, maybe there is a place where I could be like, I understood that point that you made. That was a good point. I believe X, Y, and Z. But there are some instances where there's not going to be an agreement. There's going to be some instances where if you give an inch, the right fighter is going to want to take a mile, and only you can really be able to assess where you are in the process and how much it's worth to you to continue to move forward. But, I would hope that if some of us, if we're honest, we do have right fighter tendencies. Like with my family, sometimes where I want to be right. I've shown you all the evidence. This is what it says. This is what the article said. They said on TV, blah, 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 blah. But being right is not going to be for me. And, it gets sticky because we're all human. We're all a work in progress. I say this every time because it's true. It's not worth the relationship to me. I'm never going to change the other person, even someone that I love, even someone that I would willingly die for, even someone that I will fight you over. I'm not going to be able to change them. There's some things fundamentally about my daughter and about my parents and about my brother, about whoever else, that I have a relationship with, that's going to bug me because it's not me and it's not how I would do things. But because I love them, I understand that about them. And because I value the relationship over anything and everything else, I have to make the determination to say, okay, Jennifer, you can't change what they do, but you can change how you respond to it. You can change your expectations. You can say, okay, they can have this win, because ultimately the win is not important to me. The relationship is important to me. So trying to look at it from their vantage point and understanding where they are is more important to me than being right in this argument and or receiving an apology from you or you saying, giving me a pat on the back. I don't need any of that. But I do need you. I do need the relationship, and I do need to be open-minded. So hopefully you can take some of these things, and if you are the right fighter, that you won't take it personally, but you'll be able to identify, hey, there's some areas that I need to pull back, and these are how other people are perceiving me, and this is how it can damage both me and the relationships that are important to me. And if you have someone in your life who it is an important relationship and you know that they're a right fighter, then you can apply some of the techniques not to be engaged by them, not to take it personally, and not to have your feelings hurt, which could ultimately damage the relationship. Hope you have a great week.